Okay, so these have been coming pretty fast this week. Not only have you had the UN accuse Israel of violations against children, they also did a report accusing them of crimes against humanity this week. And there's also a report, I haven't been able to dig into this, of sexual assault by IDF soldiers. Israel's response to all of these is, it's an outrage! More grave violations against children were committed in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel than anywhere else in the world last year, according to a UN report due to be published this week. The report on children in armed conflict, which has been seen by The Guardian, verified more cases of war crimes against children in the occupied territories in Israel than anywhere else, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Somalia, Nigeria, and Sudan. Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory presents an unprecedented scale and intensity of grave violations against children, the report said. The annual assessment, due to be presented to the UN General Assembly later this week by the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, lists Israel for the first time in an annex of state offenders responsible for violations of children's rights, triggering outrage from the Israeli government. In reality, this is my editorial note, Israel should have been on this list long ago, given that they imprison children. Isn't that something we consider just out of bounds for a civilized society?
Of course.
Imprisoning children. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement that the UN had, quote, added itself to the blacklist of history when it joined those who support the Hamas murderers. Holocaust card. The report details only cases that UN investigators were able to verify, so it accounts for just part of the total number of deaths and injuries of children in the course of the last year. In all, the UN verified, quote, 8,009 grave violations against 4,360 children in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, more than twice the figures for the DRC, the next worst place for violence against children.
Wow.
It is worse than the Congo. Of the total number of child victims verified, 4,247 were Palestinian, 113 were Israeli.
So basically,
that
it's even.
stems from
it's a wash.
October 7th.
Right.
Yeah, it's a wash. It's a wash. Yeah. You know what it is? It's complicated.
Right.
It's
yeah,
a
exactly.
very complicated situation.
Thing. Yeah.
It's very hard to solve this. In all, 5,698 violations were attributed to Israeli armed and security forces and 116 to Hamas's armed wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. Israeli settlers were judged responsible in 51 cases, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad's Al-Quds brigade were involved in 21. Between 7th October and the end of December last year, the UN verified the killing of 2,051 Palestinian children and said the process of attributing responsibility was ongoing, but the report noted, quote, most incidents were caused by the use of explosive weapons in populated areas by Israeli armed and security forces. The report conceded it reflected only a partial picture of the situation in Gaza. Quote, owing to severe access challenges, in particular in the Gaza Strip, the information presented herein does not represent the full scale of violations against children in this situation, it said. The report also found grave abuses by Israeli forces in the West Bank. Hang on, but I thought this is all about Hamas. There's no Hamas in the West Bank. With 126 Palestinian children killed and 906 detained. The UN verified 5 cases where soldiers used boys, quote, to shield forces during law enforcement operations. Hang on, I thought that's what Hamas does. I thought it's Hamas that uses the civilians as human shields. In the course of 2023, in the run-up to the Hamas 7th October attack on Israel, the UN said Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad's armed wings organized summer camps in which children were exposed to military content and activities. And once again, there's quite a lot of footage of Israel doing exactly that with Israeli children.
Yeah, Max Blumenthal did it when he went there. That was one of the
Right.
things that he filmed when he was there.
In the first 3 months of the war, the UN verified 23 separate cases of the denial of humanitarian access by Israeli authorities, quote, related to denied coordination of humanitarian aid missions and prevention of access to medical care. In the course of the Israeli offensive in Gaza, the UN found nearly all critical infrastructure, facilities, and services have been attacked, including shelter sites, United Nations installations, schools, hospitals, water and sanitation facilities, grain mills, and bakeries. Children are at risk of famine, severe malnutrition, and preventable death, the UN report said. I am appalled by the dramatic increase and unprecedented scale and intensity of grave violations against children in the Gaza Strip, Israel, and the occupied West Bank, Guterres tells the General Assembly in the report. Our ally, ladies and gentlemen, but we're the good guys. We're the good guys in a world of hostile, irrational actors.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the fact that half of the Gazan population are children, and then you look at the fact that they have been under blockade for this long, you do have to wonder, was the goal to drive them out, or was the goal to simply genocide them? What is the end game there? Because certainly the pre-October 7th Gaza Strip is not the end game for Israel. They clearly want all of this land for themselves. And so you have to wonder what the end game actually is and how you can lay this kind of siege upon this population without these grave offenses against children. It's impossible. It's impossible. The population is half children. It's half children.
Well, remember, and this is something that Pape gets into in his book as well. I'm hoping we can have him on to discuss it. I don't see him too much doing interviews, do you?
No, not much.
So it might be hard to get him. But one of the points he makes is from the beginning, the Zionist project was a vision of from the river to the sea.
Right.
That they would drive all these Palestinians out and that you'd have this greater Israel. That would be from the Jordan to the Mediterranean. And this is what they're doing. This is what they've always been doing. Any talk about two-state solutions, it's all been buying time. It's all been throwing up a smokescreen. It's all been gradually squeezing the Palestinians out of this region. In the end, when you look, there are no von Clausewitz. There are no contradictions. When you think you found a contradiction, check your premises. If Israel really wanted two states, there would have been two states a long time ago. They've never wanted two states. The goal, if you look at their actions, is consistent with trying to drive the Palestinians out of that area and pretending that their hand is forced at every stage where they're actually seizing whatever opportunity they can, as they did in 1967, to seize more of this land.
Right. Exactly.
Please clap.